In 1960, Dorothy knew what her office needed before anyone asked. She knew which letters had to be rewritten, which calls should wait, which meetings were real, and which ones had quietly disappeared from the calendar. She knew the small things too: who liked a morning call, which client hated being kept waiting, and when her boss was about to sign a letter that needed one more look. On paper, her job description was one paragraph long, but the real job was much larger before she ever sat at her desk. Even the newspaper had pointed her to the female column, but help wanted male. Help wanted female. Different columns, different titles, different salaries. Dorothy's job was not just typing. It was memory, timing, judgment, and discretion. Most of it learned quietly, and most of it never written down, and one part of that job went all the way back to the original meaning of the word secretary. Part 1. How the office worked. 8. The typing POO. In many large companies in 1960, Dorothy did not start her career with her own desk. She started in the typing pool on Monday mornings. The room came alive quickly. Coats came off. Handbags went under desks. Paper was rolled into machines. Then the keys began. Not one typewriter, but dozens of them at once. Rows of desks, rows of typewriters. A room full of women turning notes, drafts, and dictated words into the documents that kept the company moving. The pool served the whole office. Executives sent work in, a supervisor handed it out, and the typists returned finished documents before moving to the next assignment. They were skilled, they were fast, and most of the people whose letters they typed would never know their names. Getting out of the pool meant demonstrating something beyond speed, accuracy, judgment, discretion. A secretary assigned to one executive, a private secretary, was a different kind of role. The personal computer ended it. By the early 1990s, most large American offices no longer had one. For Dorothy, the pool was the beginning. Getting out of it required something the typing test did not measure. Rule 7. SH2RT H&D. Before Dorothy could be assigned to a senior executive, she had to learn a second language, not French or Spanish. Shorthand? Shorthand looked like another language because, in practice, it was a boss spoke in full sentences. Dorothy caught them in symbols. A few marks on a page could become a paragraph, a complaint, an apology, or a letter that went out under someone else's name. In secretarial schools, systems like Gregg and Pittman were drilled for months until a woman could capture speech at 80 to 100 words per minute. A secretary who could not take shorthand was limited in the positions she could hold. One who could had more doors open to her. The dictation machine replaced shorthand through the 1970s. By the 1980s, most executives were producing their own correspondence. The skill is largely gone now. Shorthand was the skill. The classified ads were the door. Rule 6. The classified ADS. When Dorothy looked for her first job, she turned to the female column. Throughout the 1950s and into the 1960s, major American newspapers divided job listings into male and female sections: secretary, typist, receptionist, telephone operator. Those were usually in the female column, with lower salary ranges printed beside them to a reader. In 1960. It did not necessarily look strange. It looked organized. The page showed the working world the way many people expected to find it. In August 1967, a group of women picketed the New York Times classified office carrying signs that read, "Women can think as well as type." The Times defended the practice. A vice president said the separate columns existed. In his words, for the convenience of readers, the Supreme Court ruled sex-segregated help wanted ads illegal in 1973. Within 2 years, most major newspapers had integrated their listings. Dorothy did not think much about the column in 1960. It was simply where the jobs were. The ads got her to the door. What came after was harder to put on paper. Her job description was one paragraph. The rest was understood. Part 2. What the job description left out. Rule 5. The appearance. STNDARDITHA. Newsletter, PS4, private secretaries, circulated to training programs across the country in the early 1960s. Was direct. Graciousness was the #1 attribute for a secretary to possess. It was up to her to set the tone of the office. The tone included how she looked. That usually meant a skirt or dress, nylon hose, proper shoes, and hair kept neat and off the face. In many offices, a girdle was understood as part of professional dress, even when no policy said so. She was not just answering the phone, she was part of the office's first impression, and the office knew it. In 1960. When Dorothy dressed for work in the morning, she dressed for the office's idea of what a secretary looked like. A visitor saw the dress, the shoes, the smile at the front desk. What kept the office running was on Dorothy's desk by 8 in the morning. Rule 4. The invisible WRK. Every morning, Dorothy sat down and turned the office's loose pieces into finished work. The letters her executive sent to clients, she drafted the first version, typed the final, addressed the envelope. The meeting agendas assembled from notes passed to her the day before. The reports that went upstairs formatted, typed, corrected, retyped when numbers changed. The calls she screened, the calendar she maintained, her name rarely appeared on any of it. His name went on the correspondence. Her job was to make sure it was worth his signature. The office remembered the signature, not always the hands that prepared the page. The next rule is about the work that did not leave a paper trail. Rule 3. The unwritten DUTIE. Some work produced documents. Some work prevented problems from becoming visible. Dorothy's job description covered the first kind. It said nothing about picking up personal items, arranging reservations, or smoothing out the small details of an executive's day. Nothing about noticing the supply cabinet before anyone checked it, staying late for a deadline, or remembering that the client from Detroit preferred morning calls. These tasks were not in the job description. They were in the job in 1977. A Chicago secretary named Iris Rivera was fired for declining to make coffee. She didn't drink coffee and didn't believe preparing it was part of her role. Her case drew public attention and support from secretaries across the city. That was 1977, long after Dorothy's first years in the office. In 1960, a task like that was much less likely to become a public question, but the work itself was only half the story. The other half was how people saw the woman doing it. Rule 2. The 2 ways people saw the job in many families. Secretarial work was considered a good job. Stable, white-collar, respectable. By the 1950s, the profession had its own Secretary's Day, its own conferences, and its own newsletters. A mother might tell her daughter it was a smart choice. A father might be proud that she worked in a downtown office. A private secretary to a senior executive had skills, a salary, and a place in a professional world that was not open to everyone, but popular culture often made the secretary smaller than the work she actually did. Films and television through the 1950s and 1960s often turned her into a stock character. Young, decorative, present for a joke or a romantic subplot. So the profession carried 2 images at once. One said, "This is respectable work." The other said, "Don't take her too seriously." Many women carried both ideas with them. Every day, Dorothy probably did not spend much time debating it. She had letters to type, calls to screen, and a calendar that would not manage itself, and neither image captured the quietest part of the job. Rule 1. The keeper of things that didn't go in the FA. Word secretary comes from the Latin secretum, keeper of secrets, long before the typewriter. The role existed because some information could not simply be filed, copied, or passed around. It had to be trusted to a person by 1960. The profession looked clerical. Paper, phones, calendars, typewriters. But the older function was still there. A private secretary knew things that were not in any file. She knew which meeting had been canceled and why. She knew which calls her executive did not return and which ones he always took. She knew which draft had been written and quietly set aside. She knew these things and did not discuss them. Not with the pool. Not over lunch. Not with anyone who did not need to know. That was not something a typing exam could measure. It was learned on the job and recognized, over time, by the people who depended on it most. The job description did not say it. A good secretary understood anyway. CLOC on Dorothy stayed at the firm. She moved out of the typing pool and eventually became a private secretary. By the time she retired, the typing pool was gone. Shorthand was rarely asked for. The classified ads no longer ran in separate columns. What had not changed was the outer desk, and the person who sat at it, knowing things that were not in any file. The hire letter told her what the job paid. If this brought something back, a typing pool, a shorthand notebook, a desk where everything important passed through before it reached the person in charge, you may want to stay with this series. There's more honest history here, and the next story is a different kind of job with a different kind of fine print.